Welcome to the EdUp Smart Space podcast, where we explore the emerging trends at the intersection of higher education, technology, and the built environment. Hello, I'm Craig Park, your host. Today, we're taking a virtual trip to Orlando, Florida, where Avixa's InfoComm 25 just wrapped up. Let me tell you, this year's show was absolutely packed with insights that every campus planner, facilities manager, and technology leader needs to hear and better see and experience. For those who might not be aware, AVIXA is the Audiovisual Integrated Experience Association, the international trade group that represents the $325 billion professional AV industry. InfoComm is their annual exhibition and educational event, attended by over 30,000 people. Now I know what some of you might be thinking. Another trade show recap? Really? But here's the thing. InfoComm isn't just any trade show. It's where the future of educational technology gets unveiled, tested, and sometimes completely reimagined. And this year? Well, this year felt different. There was an energy and an urgency around how quickly things are changing in our space. This won't be a new product highlight reel, though I will mention a couple. For a great look at the products featured on the show floor, go over to ravepubs.com/infocom, where Gary Kay, Steph Beckett, and the Rave team give you booth tours of many of the major and a few of the new and exciting exhibitors. Those tours are streaming free now. Gary and I have known each other for over 30 years and share a passion for promoting the value of the AV industry for its ability to allow us all to connect, communicate, and collaborate better. I do want to share my observations about the implications of the technology I saw over 3 days last week and the shared insights I gained from my conversations across the show floor, over 400,000 square feet of it with more than 800 exhibitors, about what's new and, more importantly, where are we going? By the way, my feet are really tired, but my brain is full of new ideas. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's unpack what happened at InfoComm 2025 and, more importantly, why it matters for your campus, your students, and your strategic planning for the next decade. Let's start with the elephant in the room, artificial intelligence. Now, I've been to enough conferences where AI gets thrown around like confetti at a graduation ceremony. Everyone's talking about it, but nobody's really doing much with it. Well, InfoComm 25 was different. This wasn't AI as a marketing buzzword. This was AI as a practical reality that's already transforming classrooms across the country. Here's what caught my attention. InfoComm featured over 20 sessions dedicated specifically to AI applications in professional AV. 20 sessions. That's not a trend anymore, folks. That's a movement. But what really struck me wasn't the number of sessions, it was the tone of the conversations happening in those rooms. There was this one session called AI Transformation, Where Do We Start? And the description alone tells you everything you need to know about where we are right now. It was designed for people who feel stuck between big expectations and little support. Sound familiar? I bet it does, because that's exactly where most of us are with AI right now. We're being told that AI is going to revolutionize education, transform the learning experience, and solve all our problems. Meanwhile, we're sitting in our offices trying to figure out how to get our basic AV systems to work reliably, let alone integrate some mysterious AI component. The gap between the hype and the reality has been, well, let's just say it's been significant. But here's what's changing, and why InfoComm 25 felt so different. The AI applications being demonstrated weren't pie-in-the-sky concepts. They were practical, implementable solutions addressing real problems that every campus faces. Take AI-driven audio mixing, for example. If you've ever been in a large lecture hall where the professor's voice gets lost, or where student questions from the back row are inaudible, you know this is a real problem. Traditional solutions involve complex mixing boards, multiple microphones, and often a dedicated technician. The AI solutions being shown at InfoComm can automatically adjust audio levels, filter out background noise, and ensure everyone can hear clearly, without any human intervention. Or consider intelligent camera control. We've all been in those hybrid classes where the camera is either showing the professor's back, focused on an empty whiteboard, or somehow managed to capture everything except what students actually need to see. AI camera systems can now track speakers, automatically frame shots, and even predict where the action is going to be next. It's like having a professional camera operator in every classroom, except it never gets tired, never makes mistakes, and never calls in sick. But here's the really interesting part, and this is where the why this matters comes in. These AI applications aren't just making things more convenient, they're fundamentally changing what's possible in educational spaces. When you remove the technical barriers to high-quality audio and video, you remove barriers to learning. Suddenly, a student with hearing difficulties doesn't have to struggle to follow along. A remote learner gets the same visual experience as someone sitting in the front row. A professor can focus on teaching instead of worrying about whether their microphone is working. This is what I mean when I say the AI revolution has arrived. It's not about robots taking over classrooms. It's about technology becoming invisible, intuitive, and genuinely helpful. It's about removing friction from the learning process so that education can happen more naturally, inclusively, and effectively. On a side note, one AI-enabled application caught my eye. X10AV's new Xavier platform. As an AV systems designer who started his career over 40 years ago, using the first generation of personal computers to develop and run basic language programming for the calculus of audio and video design fundamentals, Xavier may be the holy grail. I've been using the original iteration of the X10AV platform for a few years, but the demonstration of the new software was impressive. Moving on, there's another side to this AI story that came up repeatedly at InfoComm, and it's something we need to talk about seriously: security and compliance. There was an entire session dedicated to emerging compliance and security concerns for AI, and the conversations happening there were eye-opening. Here's the challenge. AI systems are creating content of their own. They're making decisions, generating responses, and storing information in ways that traditional IT security frameworks weren't designed to handle. When an AI system in your classroom automatically adjusts audio levels, it's collecting data about speech patterns, room acoustics, and usage patterns. When it tracks camera movements, it's analyzing visual information and making predictions about behavior. All of this data needs to be captured, classified, and stored appropriately. It needs to be available where necessary and protected where required. And it needs to comply with all the various privacy regulations that govern educational institutions. This isn't just a technical challenge, it's a policy challenge, a legal challenge, and an ethical challenge all rolled into one. But here's what I found encouraging about the discussions at InfoComm. The industry isn't ignoring these challenges. They're addressing them head on, developing best practices, and creating frameworks that institutions can actually implement. The message was clear. AI in education isn't just about the cool technology, it's about implementing that technology responsibly. Now, let's talk about something that might not sound as exciting as AI, but is arguably even more important for your long-term planning: network infrastructure. I know, network infrastructure doesn't exactly get the pulse racing, but stick with me here, because what I learned at InfoComm about the future of campus networking is going to change how you think about every technology decision you make. Remember when we needed separate cables for everything? Video cables, audio cables, control cables, power cables. Our equipment racks looked like spaghetti factories had exploded. Well, those days are officially over, and what's replacing them is both simpler and more powerful than anything we've had before. The big story at InfoComm 25 was something called the SDVOE Alliance's Power of 10 initiative. Now, SDVOE stands for Software Defined Video over Ethernet, which sounds technical and intimidating. Still, the concept is beautifully simple. Everything runs over standard network infrastructure instead of dedicated cables for every signal. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is the power of 10 part. We're talking about 10 gigabit Ethernet networks. That's 10 times faster than the gigabit networks on which many campuses are still running. And that extra speed isn't just about moving data faster, it's about moving data without compromising quality. Let me give you a concrete example of what this means. The SDVOE Alliance had two demonstrations running at InfoComm that perfectly illustrated the potential. The first was a classroom setup where teachers and students could have simultaneous, bidirectional communication using a single device. Not multiple devices, not complex switching systems. One device connected to the network. The educator could share content to student displays instantly, and students could share their work back to the teacher just as quickly. Multiple students could present simultaneously, and the system could create multi-view displays showing several students at once. All of this was happening with zero latency, meaning no delays, no lag, and no waiting for systems to catch up. The second demonstration was even more impressive: a live esports arena where players were gaming in real time while their gameplay was being displayed on massive screens with multi-view capabilities showing multiple players simultaneously. Now you might be thinking, that's cool, but what does gaming have to do with education? Here's the connection. Esports requires the most demanding, latency-sensitive, high-fidelity video performance you can imagine. If the technology can handle the split-second timing requirements of competitive gaming, it can handle anything you throw at it in an educational environment. And increasingly, campuses are building esports facilities not just for recreation, but as legitimate academic programs in game design, digital media, and competitive strategy. But the real revelation for me was understanding how this network-centric approach changes everything about how we plan and implement AV systems. Instead of designing separate systems for each space, one for classrooms, another for lecture halls, something different for conference rooms, you're designing one network infrastructure that can support any type of space configuration. Want to turn a regular classroom into a distance learning studio? It's a software change, not a hardware installation. Need to create a pop-up collaboration space for a special event? Connect to the network, and you're ready to go. Want to upgrade the capabilities of an existing room? Push a software update instead of rewiring the entire space. This is what I mean when I say your infrastructure decisions today matter more than ever. If you're still thinking in terms of dedicated AV systems for each space, you're going to find yourself with stranded assets very quickly. But if you're thinking in terms of network infrastructure that can support software-defined capabilities, you're building an institutional enterprise foundation that can evolve with whatever comes next. And speaking of what comes next, another aspect of this network revolution is particularly relevant for higher education: the democratization of advanced AV capabilities. Traditionally, sophisticated AV systems were expensive, complex, and required specialized expertise. They were the domain of large lecture halls and high-end conference rooms. But when everything runs over standard network infrastructure, capabilities are defined by software rather than hardware, and systems can be managed remotely and updated automatically. Suddenly, those advanced capabilities become accessible to smaller spaces, tighter budgets, and fewer technical users. A small seminar room can have the same multi-view capabilities as a large auditorium. A study group space can have the same content-sharing features as a formal presentation room. A temporary outdoor event can have the same professional AV capabilities as a permanent indoor facility. This democratization is particularly important for higher education because it aligns with how learning actually happens on campus. Yes, we have formal classrooms and lecture halls, but we also have study spaces, collaboration areas, outdoor venues, and pop-up learning environments. Students learn in residence halls, in libraries, in student centers, and in spaces that weren't originally designed for formal education at all. When AV capabilities can follow students wherever learning happens, when any space can become a connected, collaborative environment, we're not just improving the technology, we're expanding the possibilities for education itself. Next, I want to talk about why universities are the real innovation labs and leading the charge for change in collaborative technology applications. Here's something that might surprise you. While corporate America is still figuring out hybrid work, higher education is already 3 steps ahead in creating flexible, technology-enabled environments. This year's InfoComm made this crystal clear, and it's a story that every campus leader needs to understand. The centerpiece of the higher education presence at InfoComm was the HETMA Higher Education Summit, a 2-day intensive workshop that brought together technology leaders from universities across the country and around the world. HETMA stands for Higher Education Technology Managers Alliance, and if you're not familiar with this organization, you should be. They're the folks who are actually implementing these technologies on real campuses with real students and real budget constraints. What struck me about the HETMA Summit wasn't just the scale, though having 50-plus higher education professionals speaking at a single event is impressive. It was the sophistication of the conversations happening. These weren't theoretical discussions about what might be possible someday. These were practical sessions about what's working right now, what's not working, and how to make it better. Take the speaker lineup, for example. First, you had Aaron Maher Moran, Information Technology Manager from Johns Hopkins, talking about classroom technology management. Then the ubiquitous Dr. Joe Wei, Executive Director of Digital Spaces at UCLA, discussing digital spaces strategy, and Dr. Don Merritt, Director of Learning Resources at the University of Central Florida and past President of the Educational Technology Collaborative, or ETC, who you may remember from episode 3 of this show, sharing his insights on instructional resources. These people deal with the day-to-day realities of supporting thousands of students and hundreds of faculty members across diverse learning environments, and they take the time to come to InfoComm to share their insights with all of us. But what really caught my attention was the focus areas for the summit: ethics and accessibility, security and zero trust, and successful capital planning. These aren't the sexy, headline-grabbing topics that usually dominate technology conferences. They're the foundational issues determining whether technology implementations succeed or fail in the long term. First, let's talk about ethics and accessibility, because this is where higher education is leading the way. In the corporate world, accessibility is often treated as a compliance checkbox, something you must do to meet legal requirements. In higher education, accessibility is understood as fundamental to the educational mission. When designing learning environments, you can't just consider the average student. You have to consider students with hearing impairments, visual impairments, mobility challenges, learning differences, and a whole spectrum of needs that require different approaches to accessing information and participating in discussions. This means that AV systems and educational environments have to be more sophisticated, flexible, and inclusive than their corporate counterparts. They need to support multiple input methods, multiple output formats, and multiple ways of interacting with content. They need to work seamlessly with assistive technologies and provide options that don't stigmatize or isolate students who need different accommodations. The result is that higher education institutions are driving innovation in accessible technology design. The solutions that are being developed for campus environments are often more advanced, thoughtful, and user-friendly than in other sectors. Security and zero trust is another area where higher education is ahead of the curve, though not by choice. Universities face unique security challenges that most organizations don't have to deal with. You have thousands of users with varying levels of technical sophistication. You have a mix of personal and institutional devices. You have visitors, guests, and temporary users. You have research data that needs to be protected and educational content that must be shared. Traditional security models that rely on perimeter defense, keeping the bad guys out and trusting everyone inside, simply don't work in university environments. You need security models that assume every user, device, and connection could potentially be compromised and verify and validate every interaction. This zero trust approach is now being adopted across industries, but universities have been developing and refining these approaches out of necessity for years. The security frameworks discussed at the HETMA Summit aren't theoretical models. They're battle-tested approaches that are protecting real institutions with real threats. Capital planning might sound like the most boring topic, but it's where some of the most interesting innovation is happening. Universities have to think in longer time horizons than most organizations. A building might be in use for 50 years or more. Technology systems need to be designed not just for current needs, but for needs that might emerge decades in the future. This long-term thinking is driving approaches to infrastructure and system design that are more flexible, more modular, and more future-proof than what you typically see in other sectors. Universities can't afford to rip and replace systems every few years, so they're developing approaches that can evolve and adapt over time. The University of Central Florida, which hosted integrated experience tours during InfoComm, is a perfect example of this forward-thinking approach. While I didn't get to go on the tour myself this year, Don Merritt told me about how they've created learning environments that can be reconfigured for different types of activities, different class sizes, and different pedagogical approaches. The technology infrastructure supports traditional lectures, collaborative group work, hands-on labs, remote participation, and hybrid combinations of all of the above. But here's what's really interesting. These flexible, adaptable approaches that universities are developing out of necessity are now being recognized as best practices for all types of organizations. The corporate world is starting to realize that they need the same kind of flexibility, the same kind of long-term thinking, and the same kind of inclusive design that higher education has been pioneering. This is why I say that universities are the real innovation labs for educational technology. They're not just early adopters of new technologies. They're the environments where those technologies get tested, refined, and proven at scale. They're where we figure out what works in real-world conditions with real users with diverse needs and expectations. Increasingly, solutions that prove themselves in university environments are the ones that succeed in other sectors as well. Today's classroom technologies will become the corporate collaboration tools of tomorrow. The campus networking approaches of today will become the enterprise infrastructure standards of tomorrow. Now let's talk about something that's going to change how we think about physical learning environments fundamentally, the move from fixed function spaces to completely flexible, reconfigurable environments. What I saw at InfoComm suggests we're on the verge of a revolution in how we design and use educational spaces. The traditional model for educational spaces has been pretty straightforward. You design a room for a specific purpose, you install the appropriate technology, and that room serves that function for years or decades. Classrooms are for classes, lecture halls are for lectures, conference rooms are for meetings, and so on. If you need a different type of space, you build a different room. But what if that entire model is becoming obsolete? What if any space could become any type of learning environment in a matter of minutes? This isn't science fiction, it's happening right now, and InfoComm 25 showcased several technologies that are making it possible. The most dramatic examples were the portable DVL-ED displays being demonstrated by companies like Silicon Core and ViewSonic. These are 135 to 136-inch displays that fold up for transport and can be deployed in virtually any space. Think about what this means practically. You have a large empty room, maybe a gymnasium, a cafeteria, or a big open area. In 15 minutes, you can transform it into a high-end presentation space with a massive high-resolution display that rivals anything in a purpose-built auditorium. Need to change the configuration? Fold it up and set it up differently. Need to use the space for something else? Pack it away and the room returns to its original function. But the portability revolution goes beyond just displays. We're seeing all-in-one collaboration systems that can turn any table into a high-tech meeting space. Wireless presentation systems that can connect to any display or projector. Audio systems that can create professional sound reinforcement in spaces that were never designed for it. The implications of this flexibility revolution are profound, especially for higher education. Universities are constantly dealing with changing enrollment, evolving pedagogical approaches, and shifting space needs. A classroom that's perfect for one type of course might be completely wrong for another. A space that works well for 30 students might be too small for 50 or too large for 15. With truly flexible technology systems, you can adapt spaces to meet changing needs instead of trying to adapt needs to fit available spaces. You can create specialized environments for specific courses or events without having to dedicate permanent space to those functions. You can experiment with new teaching methods without having to commit to expensive infrastructure investments. Here's where it gets really interesting. This flexibility isn't just about making better use of existing spaces. It's about expanding the definition of what constitutes a learning environment. This expansion of learning environments is particularly important as universities grapple with changing student expectations and evolving educational models. Today's students don't just learn in formal classroom settings. They learn in groups, individually, in scheduled sessions and spontaneous gatherings, indoors and outdoors, during the day and late into the night. Traditional approaches to educational technology have focused on supporting formal learning in designated spaces. But if technology can follow students wherever learning happens, if any space can become a connected, collaborative environment, then we're not just improving the technology, we're expanding the possibilities for education itself. There's another aspect of this flexibility revolution that's worth considering: the economic implications. Traditional AV installations are expensive, not just because of the equipment costs, but because of the installation, configuration, and maintenance requirements. Each room needs to be individually designed, wired, programmed, and supported. But when systems are portable, when they're software defined, when they can be managed remotely and updated automatically, the economics change dramatically. Instead of having dedicated systems in every room, you can have a smaller number of high-quality, flexible systems that can be deployed where and when they're needed. This is particularly relevant for institutions dealing with budget constraints, changing space utilization patterns, or uncertainty about future needs. Instead of making large permanent investments in fixed infrastructure, you can make smaller, more flexible investments that adapt to changing circumstances. One of the most striking things about InfoComm 25 was the truly international scope of the event. With companies from more than 50 countries showcasing their solutions, it wasn't just an American trade show. It was a global conversation about the future of educational technology, and that global perspective reveals some fascinating trends that every campus leader should understand. First, let's discuss what this international presence actually means. When companies from 50-plus countries are gathered in one place, you see not just different products, but also different approaches to solving similar problems. You see how different cultures, educational systems, and economic conditions drive innovation in different directions. Take the Taiwanese companies that were highlighted at InfoComm, for example. Their focus was on smart homes, AI conferencing, digital signage, and IoT integration, areas where Asian markets have often been ahead of North American adoption curves. These companies are developing solutions for highly connected, technology-integrated environments that are becoming the norm in many parts of the world. Interestingly, these international perspectives influence the development of solutions for North American markets. The AI conferencing technologies developed in Asia are now being adapted for American classrooms. The digital signage approaches that work in European universities are being implemented on U.S. campuses. Canadian colleges are adopting the common IoT integration strategies in Australian institutions. This cross-pollination of ideas and approaches is accelerating innovation in ways that wouldn't be possible if each market was developing solutions in isolation. We're seeing the best ideas from around the world being combined, refined, and adapted for different contexts. The Avixa Exchange community is great for learning from those international cohorts. You can learn more at exchange.avixa.org. But there's another aspect of this global perspective that's particularly relevant for higher education: the recognition that students and faculty are increasingly mobile, international, and connected across borders. A student might start their education in one country, study abroad in another, and complete their degree in a third. Faculty collaborate with colleagues around the world. Research projects span multiple continents. This means that educational technology systems need to work seamlessly across different countries, different languages, different time zones, and different technical standards. A high-flex learning system that works perfectly within one institution needs to be able to connect reliably with systems at partner institutions around the world. A learning management system needs to support students who might be accessing it from anywhere on the planet. The solutions being developed for this global, connected educational environment are more sophisticated, more interoperable, and more robust than what would be needed for purely local applications. And these enhanced capabilities benefit everyone, even institutions that primarily serve local populations. The HD-based T Alliance, which had a significant presence at InfoComm, exemplifies this global approach to standards development. HD-based T is a connectivity standard that allows audio, video, control, and power to be transmitted over standard network cables. It was developed through international collaboration and is now supported by manufacturers around the world. This global interoperability is becoming increasingly important as educational institutions face pressure to demonstrate value, efficiency, and effectiveness. When you can choose from the best solutions worldwide, when regional availability or compatibility issues do not limit you, you can make decisions based purely on what works best for your specific needs and circumstances. The Audinate presence at InfoComm, showcasing AV over IP solutions, is another example of how global standards enable better local implementations. Dante, Audinate's audio networking protocol, is used by worldwide manufacturers to create audio systems that can integrate seamlessly, regardless of who made the individual components. As my friend Corey Boyer, Audinate's Director of Enterprise Solutions and Strategic Partners, demonstrated, for a university, this means you can choose the best microphones from one manufacturer, the best speakers from another, the best mixing capabilities from a third, and the best control interface from a fourth, all while maintaining a unified, integrated system that works reliably and can be managed efficiently. However, perhaps the most critical insight from this global perspective is recognizing that higher education's challenges are universal. Whether talking to technology managers from American universities, European colleges, Asian institutes, or Australian campuses, you hear remarkably similar concerns: budget constraints, changing student expectations, evolving pedagogical approaches, security requirements, accessibility needs, and the pressure to demonstrate measurable outcomes. Solutions being developed to address these universal challenges are becoming more sophisticated, comprehensive, and effective because they're being tested and refined in diverse environments around the world. A solution that works in a small liberal arts college in Ohio, a large research university in Singapore, and a technical institute in Germany is probably a pretty robust solution. This global testing and validation process accelerates the development of truly mature, reliable educational technology solutions. Instead of having to wait years for technologies to be proven in local markets, institutions can benefit from solutions that have already been tested and refined in multiple contexts around the world. As we wrap up our deep dive into InfoComm 25, I want to leave you with some provocative questions that I think every campus leader should consider. These aren't questions with easy answers, but they will shape the future of higher education technology. For the first question, what happens to the traditional classroom if any space can become a learning space instantly? We've talked about portable displays, flexible AV systems, and network-based solutions that can transform any environment into a high-tech learning space. But if that's true, why do we still need dedicated classrooms? I'm not suggesting that classrooms are going to disappear overnight, but we need to seriously consider what unique value they provide in a world where technology can follow learners anywhere. Maybe the answer is that classrooms become specialized environments for specific types of learning that can't happen anywhere else. Perhaps they become social spaces that foster community and collaboration in ways that distributed learning can't. Or maybe they evolve into something completely different that we haven't imagined yet. Second question, what becomes of the human educator's unique value when AI can handle routine classroom management? We've seen AI systems that can automatically adjust audio and video, manage content sharing, facilitate group discussions, and even provide personalized feedback to students. As these systems become more sophisticated, what's left for human instructors to do? This isn't a question about AI replacing teachers. I don't think that's going to happen. But it is a question about how the role of educators evolves as AI takes over more of the routine, technical aspects of teaching. Maybe human educators become more focused on mentoring, inspiration, and creative problem solving. Maybe they become curators of learning experiences rather than deliverers of information. Or maybe they develop entirely new roles that we can't currently envision. Third question. What happens when every surface, every device, every interaction is connected and intelligent? We're moving toward a world where the entire campus becomes a connected, responsive environment, displays that know who's looking at them and adjust content accordingly. audio systems that automatically optimize for the acoustics of each space and the hearing needs of each individual, lighting and climate systems that respond to learning activities and user preferences. This level of connectivity and intelligence could create amazing learning environments, but it also raises profound questions about privacy, autonomy, and human agency. How do we balance the benefits of intelligent, responsive environments with the need for personal privacy and individual control? How do we ensure that these systems serve human needs rather than the other way around? Fourth question, if learning can happen anywhere, anytime, with anyone, what's the unique value proposition of a university? Online learning, remote collaboration, and global connectivity are making it possible for students to access high-quality educational content and expert instruction from anywhere in the world. If the best professors, the most advanced technology, and the richest learning resources are all available online, why do students need to come to a physical campus at all? These are the important questions we need to ask. Again, I'm not suggesting that universities will disappear, but I think they need to clearly articulate what unique value they provide in an increasingly connected world. It could be the research opportunities, the peer interactions, the extracurricular experiences, or the credentialing function, or maybe something entirely different emerges as technology continues to evolve. Last question, and one I've been asking my college and university clients for over a decade. How do we prepare students for jobs that don't exist yet, using technologies that haven't been invented yet? The pace of technological change is accelerating, and the half-life of specific technical skills is getting shorter. By the time students graduate, some of what they learned as freshmen may already be obsolete. This suggests that higher education should focus less on teaching specific technologies and more on teaching adaptability, critical thinking, and continuous learning skills. But how do we do that effectively? How do we create learning environments that prepare students for uncertainty rather than for specific, predictable career paths? Again, these are the questions that I think will define the next phase of higher education technology development. They don't have easy answers and probably don't have single answers. Different institutions will probably develop different approaches based on their unique missions, student populations, and community needs. But what I found encouraging about InfoComm 25 is that the industry is starting to grapple seriously with these big questions. The conversations weren't just about the next product release or the latest technical specification. They were about the fundamental purpose of educational technology and how it can better serve the mission of higher education. The AI sessions weren't just about what AI can do. They were about what AI should do and how to implement it responsibly. The security discussions weren't just about protecting systems. They were about protecting the educational mission. The flexibility demonstrations weren't just about technical capabilities. They were about expanding access to high-quality learning experiences. This suggests to me that we're entering a more mature phase of educational technology development, where the focus is shifting from what's possible to what's valuable and what's responsible. That's a shift that I think will ultimately benefit everyone: students, educators, institutions, and society as a whole. So, where does all this leave you as a campus leader, facilities manager, or technology professional? Let me suggest some concrete action items based on what we've learned from InfoComm 25. First, audit your current network infrastructure with an eye toward 10 gigabit capabilities. You don't need to upgrade everything immediately, but you need to understand what you have, what you need, and what your upgrade path looks like. The software-defined, network-centric future we've discussed depends on having robust, high-speed network infrastructure as a foundation. Second, start having conversations about AI integration, but focus on practical applications rather than theoretical possibilities. Look for specific problems that AI might help solve: audio quality issues, camera management challenges, content sharing difficulties, and explore solutions that address those specific needs. Third, engage with your faculty and students in the planning process. The most successful technology implementations solve real problems for real users. Don't assume you know what people need. Ask them, observe them, and involve them in the design process. As I've said before on the show, no one is as smart as all of us. Fourth, build relationships with your IT, facilities, and AV partners for holistic campus planning. The integrated, network-centric approaches we've discussed require collaboration across traditional organizational boundaries. You can't optimize classroom technology without considering network infrastructure, security policies, and facilities management. Fifth, start thinking about security as a fundamental design requirement rather than an add-on feature. Zero Trust isn't just about installing security software. It's about rethinking how all your systems work together to protect your institution's data, systems, and educational mission. Finally, stay connected with organizations like HETMA and ETC. The Educational Technology Collaborative and events like InfoComm that bring together practitioners who are dealing with similar challenges. The higher education technology community is remarkably collaborative and generous with sharing insights, experiences, and solutions. We always close the show with the big question, what comes after what comes next? Based on what we saw at InfoComm, we're moving toward a world where technology becomes completely invisible and intuitive. The next phase isn't about better AV systems or smarter AI. It's about technology that disappears entirely, leaving only pure learning experiences. Imagine walking into any space and it just knows what you need to learn, how you learn best, and who you need to connect with. No interfaces to master, no systems to configure, no technical barriers between intention and outcome. The big question isn't what will the technology do, but what will humans do when technology gets out of the way completely? That's what comes after what comes next, and it's both exciting and a little terrifying to think about. The future of educational technology is being written right now, on campuses around the world, by people who are working to create better learning environments for students and more effective tools for educators. InfoComm 25 showed us that this future is closer than we might have thought, more practical than we might have expected, and more exciting than we might have imagined. InfoComm is an experience not to be missed. I had the great pleasure to see many old friends and to meet new connections that span the gamut of audio, video, and integrated systems, and see and experience the cutting edge of the audio, video, processing, and network management technologies. If you haven't been, mark your calendar for InfoComm 26 in Las Vegas next June. And remember, wear comfortable shoes. For more information about InfoComm and other pro AV insights, visit avixa.org. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive into InfoComm 25. I hope you found it useful, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little inspiring. Remember, the best technology is the technology that disappears, leaving only better learning experiences behind. For more insights on educational technology trends, visit us at theedupexperience.com, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you or someone you know is interested in being a guest on the show, reach out to me at edupexperience@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Craig Park, saying let's keep building smart space together.